Okay, so what you see in the vise is what's known or referred to as a mini Leach Damsel jig. It's referred to that because of the color and being an olive. But these are popular in black, using it for regular leech pattern. Oftentimes you'll see people put a red bead in front to kind of give it the excuse me, but to kind of give it the egg-sucking leech feel, something like that. Now there's kind of an orientation to this fly, so when you're tying it on a jig hook, the fly is going to fish like this, and so when you're fishing it, you're wanting all this fiber to ride up. There are people that tie these on regular kind of a caddis hook or something like that, and you'll see where the orientation of the zonker strip, which this happens to be squirrel, is riding like this, where this is facing up, and that's because with a regular caddis hook or something that curved hook, something of that nature, that's the orientation and way in which the fly is going to ride in the water. So we want this zonker part to ride up, and so tying it on a jig hook, we're going to tie it in upside down. So it's my understanding that Landon Meyer, he's a Colorado guide, Umpqua tiger, I believe, came up with these patterns. And so I'm going to do the best I can to give him some justice when I tie his pattern. So anyway, that's what we're going to tie. And we'll just get started. So the recommended size on these is between 12 and 18. For sake of your eyes and my eyes, shooting a video, I'm going to tie it on a size 12. So I've just got a size 12 jig hook in the vise. Well, if I can get the darn thing straight there. I keep looking down at my camera angle. There we go. And not paying attention to the actual fly. So I've paired this with a 1/8 tungsten bead slotted. I believe it's a 3.0 or 3.2 millimeter. And so the thread I'm going to be using is Damsel 140. You can kind of see I've got a bunch of fur on there. But Damsel 140 flat waxed in olive. And so what I like to do is I like to start this thread right down into that bead, and you can see I can kind of take that and shove it forward. So I put a couple wraps in, shove it forward, and all that's doing is helping chew up some real estate down inside that bead head. And you don't got to get crazy. You can use your fingernail to push it forward if you want. Whoop, I lost it there. Stuff of that nature. So, and we're just gonna place a few wraps in and trim out the tag. So next, what I'm going to use is pearl flashabou, and pearl lends itself very well to taking the color of the thread. Now it doesn't always work as you would like, but for olive it's going to work very well. And so I like to tie this in starting at the front and working my way back. I try to get some nice touching turns here, and the goal here is to get your thread about a bodkin width behind the point, or right where the barb would be if it was a barbed hook. You can also tie this in the back and then bring it forward if you find that more comfortable for whatever reason. And next I'm just going to work back forward again with kind of touching turns, just to kind of make a nice smooth body, or pretty close to smooth body. So this fly doesn't have a rib, and to protect it, or to protect the Flashabou, one thing you can do is take some super glue and just gently line your thread with some super glue. Want to make sure you don't have too much. And next we can just start to palmer the Flashabou forward. And as you do that, it's going to grab a hold of your Flashabou, and it'll help it stick or bite, and that's going to be the protection. And we're just going to work this guy up. Again, this is a fairly simple tie here. The original pattern called for ostrich herl up here in the collar. We're not going to do that. We're going to use pine squirrel. That's it. We're going to use pine squirrel in a dubbing loop and keep it simple. We don't need to overthink this one. Although if you have ostrich herl, you're welcome to tie that in when we get there. So I'm going to come back with my thread, reversing the Flashabou so it works to the back. So it wrapped all the way forward. It's touching the glue. I get it up to the thread behind the bead. I work it back. And we're just going to create this collar right here, or this collar space. And it's about a bodkin or bodkin in width. Bodkin or bodkin and a half width behind the eye, or the bead. So next what we want to do is we want to take some pine squirrel. If you want to tie this on a larger size, you could use rabbit. Say if you wanted to go up to like an 8 or something like that. Yeah, we just need to get a distance, and so a ruler comes in real handy right here, because it's going to look very large when it doesn't need to be. And you probably don't want it to be. So you can kind of see how long the body is right there. That's about a little shy of a half inch, maybe a half inch, depending on where you put your measurement. And so what we want to do is have 3 times that of pine squirrel. So what I'll do on this size 12 is I normally do this laying on my desk, but a ruler comes in real handy right here. So let's see if I can get this lined out so you can see it. Okay, so there we go. Sorry, I didn't mean to be out of camera. And so what I like to do is I'll come in and I'll cut this at 1.5 inches, or right about there. So I just take it, I'll pinch it. I'm going to move it up my way, knock things over in the process. And I'll go ahead and trim that out. So at 1.5 inches, you can already see that this thing is super long. And we're not going to use all that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take about a 1/2 inch off of this, because we're going to use this 1/2 inch that we're going to cut off for the collar itself. And so you can take this back to the ruler if you want, or you can kind of eyeball it. But you're looking at about 2.5 to 3 times the length from behind the bead to the distance of the tail. And so just for sake here, we'll just go ahead and there we go. That's my cut point. Just snip that. I'm going to set that aside. Okay, so now we have this, and that's just about right. Maybe a tad on the short side, but not horribly. So next what we need to do is we need to get a good tie-in point right here. So you can, and you don't need much, 1/16 of an inch or something, very, very, very shallow into the actual fur. And so you can kind of pull it off, and you can kind of trim it Now, one thing too, is you can see how this tail is cut square. There's a lot of people that believe that it's better that you cut this at an angle. Something similar to this nature here. So that it comes to a point, or pretty close to a point. And there's a theory that this helps the very end of the tail actually flow in the water a little better. So now that we have what we're looking for, and we have our tie-in point, what we're going to do is we're going to turn this over so that the skin of the squirrel is up top. I'm going to bring my thread forward to right behind the bead, and I'm just going to pinch this on top. And pinch wraps work well here. Now, at this point, you want to make sure that you have the slot orientated, the slot in the bead orientated where you want it, because we're not going to come back very far to tie this in. However, you can kind of see we have this little tiny bit of a gap in the bead showing, and this skin off the actual zonker strip lends itself well to help cover that up if you want to do that. You don't have to do that. It's just something that I wanted to bring forth. And so there's so many ways to do these things, just different techniques in general. So I'm trying to cover them all, as many as possible. So we should have something that looks like this. Now I'm going to lick my fingers and just draw everything to the back so that it's out of my way and start to get it to flow. And we want to orientate it so that it's directly on top of the hook shank like this. Now, if you're interested in having more flash show through, you can come in with your scissors, and this is totally up to you whether or not you want to do this, but you can come in with your scissors and cut just a tad bit more off of the hide where you want it to flow to. A lot of people like that to start showing up past the flash. Some like it all up front. That's, again, it's totally up to you what you want to do there. So I'm going to ramp back just a little bit so I have about a full bodkin width behind the bead. I'm just going to kind of jump my thread forward. Now I'm going to create a small dubbing loop. So if you're wanting to follow the original pattern, the collar here is ostrich herl, like I said before. So you just tie your ostrich herl in right here, work your thread forward, and wrap it forward, and then tie it off. But we're just going to use the zonker strip itself. So you can trim this off. Sorry, I was trying to reorientate that in my fingers. You can trim this off. Let me rephrase that. You can trim this off in your fingers, or if you want, you can, after you've made your loop, you can slide this right on in. Oh. It's a little bit more difficult with stuff in my way. And we'll slide it right on up. And then so what we're looking to do here is make this, because we need to get rid of the tips. We don't want the tips. We want to be kind of right in the middle here. Something close to this. Right about there. Because all we're really looking for here is this dark colored fuzz, and we're going to thin that out too. But so I'm just going to go with that there. Now you can use a dubbing spinner if you want. What I'm just going to use here is hackle pliers because it works easy enough. So what I'll do, I know this is a little close to the camera, but you can see the loop is in my finger. I'm just going to pinch onto that loop to close it, and then take my hackle pliers and pinch onto the thread And that way I've got my other fingers back to use. Now I'm going to trim this out here just so it doesn't get in the way. Now the easy way to do this is to lift your dubbing loop straight up and kind of orientate everything right where you want it to be. If it's not perfect, don't worry about it, but you want to be something along these lines. Sometimes these fibers will get real crazy. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim out the hide side or the skin side as close as possible. And a lot of times you'll be left with this where it gets cut too close. And so you can gently, and I have to emphasize gently, realign that sort of like so. Now you can kind of manipulate this with everything tight and up top and get the tips to swing out the other way. Now we're going to do the same thing to the tip side. So we're left with basically this. So if you've put this in a dubbing spinner, now you can use that and utilize that. You can also very gently try to slide everything down to get it closer to the bead itself. I know I'm moving my vise a little bit, but it's easier to work with. So next I'm just going to start to spin this thing up by hand. We'll get that spiral staircase going. Uh-oh. Whoop. Oh, hopefully I still caught enough. I cut it too close to my hackle plier tips. Like, we only need about a turn and a half or so. I think I saved it. Next, I'm going to take my toothbrush, kind of come in here and just work that a little bit. I'm going to be kind of gentle doing this now that I lost some. And I'm just going to kind of draw everything to the back and start to work over. And we want to try to get up tight to the bead. If you have to give a little space, give it on the back side, because this fur is going to cover that back side. And you can still get up tight to the bead. Like so. It's not, once this all folds over, you'll never see it. Okay. Next, I'm just going to tie this off right behind the bead. And I'll trim out the last of my dubbing loop. Now, to help keep all this in place, I'm just going to glue my thread. And I'm actually just going to wrap just a fuzz, and I have to emphasize again, a fuzz, just into that fur. It's going to help get it to stick. And now we can whip finish the fly. I go like 4 or 5 turns, pull it tight, and then I'll trim it out. And for safety precautions, I got a little too much on there. I'll glue the thread. Now use your bead to slide. If you're using like something like I'm using here with the brush, use the bead and slide down into the thread. That way you're not tapping into all that material, because we want that material to flow and collapse and pop open and do all that fun stuff that flies do when they're in the water. So once you kind of have that, you can brush this back open. Now on the original Damsel jig that Landon tied, he actually cuts out all of this right here. Oops, sorry, my finger's in the way. He actually cuts out all this right here, and so that it's very short in that particular area where my fingers are pinching. You can do that if you want, absolutely. He created the fly, and I think it may suit your best interest to do so. I'm going to leave it kind of full, but I don't want it to cover all my flash either. And so I come in after the fact and groom it just a little bit, so that we wind up with something like this. If you want to shape this fly, which potentially could help it swim better when it's in the water, you can dunk it in water and shape it with your fingers and let it dry overnight. You can also, take your toothbrush or whatever and move all this stuff forward. And if your collar's not perfect, seriously, this is not a fly to worry about that too much on. This is a heavy-duty fishing fly for Euro style. So once you have it all done, if you need to come back in and you say, hey, I don't like how the fur here is bumping into the shank, you can come in and you can trim more of it out if you want, so that it rides just on the backside, or comes down, or collapses, whatever terminology you want to use. Collapses right on the shank like so, allowing it to do this and giving you more flash to show. So a lot of options. Just make sure, depending on the hook you use, how your zonker strip is orientated, and have fun with this pattern. If you like the videos, give them a thumbs up. Always appreciate when you do that. Subscribe and share. If you have found this video and you're not a part of Fly Tying for Beginners over on Facebook, this video is a part of the classes. This is actually week 2 of the jig session, and this is kind of an exploratory session on different things that we can do with jig hooks. This fly just happened to make that list for us, and so yeah, have fun with it. Tie a few up, take them fishing, and as always, happy tying, everybody, and take care.